Tēnā koutou I tēnei ahi ki te kōrero Making Clickbait. Ko au te kaiwhakahaere hōtaka o te tarituhi kupu a whakaahua, ko Eloise Weber tōku ingoa. Good afternoon and welcome to our Script to Screen talk, Making Clickbait. My name is Eloise Weber and I'm the Program Manager at Script to Screen. We are honoured to be joined by the creators of Netflix crime thriller Clickbait, Tony Ayres and Christian White. Thank you to the New Zealand Film Commission and Foundation North for their support that enables us to put on these events. Now I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Cass Avery to moderate the conversation. A producer, executive producer and writer, Cass has helmed and scripted more than 50 documentaries and series commissioned in New Zealand and Australia. She is currently Head of Development and an Executive Producer at Augusto. Over to you, Cass.
Thanks, Eloise. Nau mai kia Tony Ayres me Christian White. Me te mihi kia korua motuai I tēnei rā, ki te kōrero kia mātou mo te hanga Clickbait. So welcome to Tony Ayres and Christian White, and thank you both today for joining us to talk to us about creating Clickbait. It's lovely.
Thanks for having us.
All the way from Melbourne, and so we're all in lockdown together on this one for those of us joining from the Auckland side of things. And for the benefit of those joining, Tony Ayres is a filmmaker, television director, producer and showrunner for unscripted as well as scripted shows. And I know for most people here, the big reference probably was the TV drama The Slap, which is pertinent to Clickbait for reasons that we'll get to a little bit later on. And Tony was also an EP on the New Zealand TV series Creamery with Flat 3. So there's another connect here, and is the co-creator of Clickbait. And Christian White is an Australian author and screenwriter, and wrote The Nowhere Child, and followed by The Wife and the Widow, and then a feature drama, The Relic. And congrats on funding for your latest feature that just came through in the announcement. I think it was today, Christian.
Thank you. Yeah.
Nice work. That answers the question about what next. But Christian is also the co-creator of Clickbait, the 8-part series that's been a massive hit for Netflix all over the world. Now, I know we're going to be really struggling to get through everything that we could talk about the show in the hour that we've got, so I'll just jump right in. And I know that you both connected on a work that sort of became or moved into being Clickbait, but Christian, could you take us back really to the genesis of the relationship and talk about moving into a kind of collaborating relationship on creating for the screen with Tony? Yeah,
so the sort of the seed that would have one day eventually completely change and become something better, which is Clickbait. It was back in 2000, I think it was 2014 or 2015. I was studying screenwriting and I entered a competition for the Australian Writers Guild, and it was, you know, make up a TV show and write the pilot. And the winner got one of the things, I think the winner won latest version of Final Draft and a meeting with Matchbox. It was something like that, you know, and I was lucky enough to win that. And the meeting was, you know, I'm based in Melbourne. The meeting was in Sydney, and they said, you know, you just Skype, because it was Skype back then. And I made a big deal. No, I'm going to fly up to Sydney. You know, I'm going to, you know, this is my big break. You know, I wore a long sleeve shirt. It was a ridiculously hot day, and I was sweating. And I kind of went in, and I had this meeting. Not with Tony. I had this meeting, and I honestly can't even remember much, but I left thinking, I don't know, I was just this sweaty, sort of shy mess. And I left thinking, well, that's it. That's that done. You know, I'll let them move on to the next project. And then I guess it was maybe a month later, I got a random email from Tony Ayres. And it was saying, hey, do you want to come in for a meeting? And he'd read the script, and I, you know, had a minor freak out. And then we came in and met, and yeah, just that's sort of evolved from there. The project was, you know, anyone who's seen Clickbait know it's all about social media and the internet. But the project that I sort of came in for was, it was set in 1981. It was more of a traditional sort of a missing woman, and you know, it's completely different. And then through this period of, I guess, years, we just sort of started throwing the idea back and forth, and it just became this beautiful, completely new. I actually don't even consider it the same project as what I consider it as a completely new I think that got me, you know, that let me meet Tony, and then we came up with something new. That's sort of how I think about it.
So Tony, for you, when you were obviously interested in working with Christian and forming a collaboration, what's that relationship like for you? Because you've obviously done this a number of times.
Well, I really like Christian's script. He's a really fantastic writer. And so we met, and I just, like I was directing a movie at the time, so it was just kind of a little bit chaotic. And I remember, like I just thought that, having done the slap, I thought the Christian script could really be, you could use the format of the slap and that create a drama series from that. Like, it's almost like, I think we joked at one stage, it was like the slap on meth. It was kind of like, well, rather than, it's like a slap, what if you made it a real gut punch? Like, what if you made it a serious crime? And that, I think that was how it all started. And then we sort of, remember we actually had, from your original script, we created 8 episodes based on that first script, and just one thing led to another, and it was kind of really cool. And what happened was I took that to England, and I had sort of 2 meetings, one with Channel 4 and one with ITV, and everyone liked the idea of the format, because it was just like an original way of telling a crime story, and everyone liked the script. But ITV wanted us to go one way, which was more conservative and conventional, and Channel 4, this great guy called Simon Maxwell, who was there at the time, said, no, we like the format, like the script, but I think you should, like the whole thing about the missing, the kidnapped girl just feels like there's a lot of missing girl stories. It's a bit of a trope. I think you should start somewhere else and make it, really modern. And so that was the challenge. And so, like I came back and, we were trying to decide which way to go. And Christian and I both just wanted to go the more challenging way, the Channel 4 route. So so that was how we, remember? And Christian did this incredible research.
Yeah, I went away for, I guess it was 4 or 6 weeks or something, and just did research, and I just found all, I got myself on several government watch lists because I was just going down any rabbit hole I could find, and all there's these a million amazing horrific stories on the internet about the internet. But what Tony and I both the sort of stories we're after were the human stories, and how certain stories affected the individual, and we came up with lots of things, maybe mild spoilers for Clickbait, so hopefully everyone's seen it who's watching. But we came up, across things like suicide whisperers, these people who talk people into killing themselves online, and sometimes they watch, and we thought, oh, geez, that's a really cool idea. And
there's a famous case that Christian unearthed about this German guy who did that. It was kind of like... Yeah,
he would encourage them and watch them die via webcam, and so we'd got to keep that and think, okay, we'll put that in our back pocket, and really, just got. I mean, it was a crazy. It was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had to do. Just go and find the most fucked up stories I could come up with, and then just shoved them all in a document, and then handed them to Tony, and then that was sort of.
So we constructed the series out of real stories. So and Christian's research document was phenomenal, and it was really 2 or 3 real crimes that kind of that became the plot for the series.
And so, leaning into crime, you've gone into a genre. Writing for genre is an interesting challenge. And did you, as you were working this up, what did you notice about the changes that you were making writing for a crime genre, writing for that kind of stacking up of plot?
I think it's sort of, in a way, easier writing genre, because you've got this, if you start with a really interesting crime, you've just got this engine that pushes you and just generates story throughout the whole thing. So I think, and I've never worked on anything that's not genre, so I can't really compare it, but I think with genre, and especially thriller, you have these sort of rules and tropes built in already, and then what you can do with that is sort of subvert things and really focus on character, and so I don't know how you feel, Tony, but for me that was yeah, that was that with genre. You've got a thrust.
And also the thing I really loved about the format is that even though it is kind of got a genre superstructure, each episode is about character. So each episode is about a particular person. And you know, whilst Christian is so great with genre, but I actually hadn't done this kind of genre before. So this was the first for me. And so, you know, like, but it was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun. You know, it was a lot of fun. I think my instincts were to sort of have more languid character scenes where people just looked at themselves in the mirror or ate ice creams or, you know, like masturbated. You know, like that was my sort of instinct.
Yeah, but, I think one of the first scenes is the character masturbating. I think, you know, so I made it in. But and that was fun as well, because what we did is we, you know, whichever character we chose for the episode, it was sort of dictated by a story, because they needed a certain clue. It was sort of the best character to tell that part of the story. But then what we do is have all this time with this character, and we could really, you know, delve into them and talk about them and sort of let them steer the story as well. So it was yeah, writing the format. It was such a fun, challenging, but really. It's sort of an exciting way to write. I thought it was just cool choosing that person and then figuring out who they are. You know, it was really yeah, cool.
I love the format as well, but it does come with a built-in degree of difficulty. I think if it was an Olympic dive, it would be one of the higher ones, because you've got to basically what you've got to do is move the story forward with each new point of view. You've got to uncover something that is crucial to the central dilemma with each new point of view. And you've also got to tell the story of how this particular character is invested and how this crime affects this particular character. And so it's got a very high degree of difficulty. And at the same time, you've got to move the narratives of your central characters, who are in some ways, they start off being the central characters in their own episodes, but become secondary characters in the other episodes. And how do you keep that kind of secondary character narrative moving through as well? But that, you know, it's challenging. It's fun.
And yeah, and originally we had, I think the plan originally was to have, you know, if it was whoever's episode it was, we're just in their POV strictly the entire time. And then it might have been, you might remember better, Tony, but it might have been a Netflix note that sort of suggested that we find these key characters that we can, you know, we create the rules where we can cut away. So, you know, to Pia, for example, even if it's someone else's episode, we can still cut to Pia. And that was really helpful as well, to keep that the emotional core of it sort of active, I think.
Yeah.
Within all of that, you've got your 8 episodes and each episode has a point of view. We still have, I think, a really central character in the wife. And tell me about her and your decision to make her your kind of lock for the series.
Well, for me, it was, you know, there are a couple of things. One, you know, she is the person who goes through the biggest emotional journey, both, you know, losing her husband, then discovering all of these things about him. And these things that she discovers get progressively worse and worse, which make her question the very nature of her marriage. And at the same time, you know, one of the things, you know, in the research, it's everywhere, and just, you know, anecdotally from friends, women are almost always the targets on online sort of campaigns. Like they get attacked so often, and, you know, and it's just felt like, weirdly, even though it was her husband who's supposedly the villain, it made perfect sense for her also to be doxxed and attacked and blamed, and because we wanted to look at the impact of these online, you know, the way that the things that happen online leak into the real world, and the impact that can have. So she felt like the perfect, like she was always the heart of the show. That's the way we talked about her.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I found the same thing. I was just thinking, you made me think, Tony, then of about a year ago, my wife, Summer, and I were we were in a newspaper article, and I didn't read the social media comments, but the social media comments, no one said anything really about me, but they just tore Summer, my wife, apart, and like really ridiculous. God. Like, yeah, like one of them was, and I still say this just because it's hilarious, but one of them was, Summer is her name's Summer. Summer is a new word for loser, and they just really went after her, and just for no real. It wasn't a controversial article or anything. It was just a lovely article about writing and stuff. Yeah, it was just this nice kind of little sort of light thing. But yeah, it's so interesting that that just occurred to me then that they really, women do have it much harder. So it made sense to so the character of Sophie always made sense that she was going to go through the most shit, I suppose, and so it made sense that she would be a woman.
And also the other central relationship is the sister Pia, and it was really important for us that those two women go through that journey together, particularly because they really didn't like each other. We just thought that's always better for drama.
Yeah, it was always the Pia's arc. We always talked about she loses her brother but gains a family, or this idea that we rip her apart, but then the two women kind of start a pose and kind of just have to work together, and there's something nice about that.
And there is a civilian procedural element in the show which we gave to Pia. So we, her role is slightly Scooby-Doo, like she goes. So and so it felt like, when we were making the show, it felt very much like Pia was like she was the head. She was kind of working things out, and and Sophie was the heart, and and somehow the two women meet at the end. That always felt like the right trajectory.
And you've got, obviously this is the interesting thing about your 8 episodes and having different characters telling the story. You've got a core cast of very strong characters, and obviously there's they're a really interesting and diverse cast, and you've had quite good feedback, or quite interesting feedback, on some of those decisions and how you've chosen to portray people. And I'm interested in some of those, the feedback and your decisions on how you wrote some of those characters.
Well, I just learned from talking to Tony recently that a lot of people were amazed that our Muslim character was never suspected as a suicide bomber. He was never, these are the tropes that everyone, I think that some of the praise we got was you just wrote a normal Muslim character who didn't blow anyone up and wasn't radicalized. That was part of it.
Yeah, because Christian's not on social media. I get to see some of this stuff, and that was one of my favorite articles about the show, actually. That like this Muslim critic said, "Oh, he was just waiting for the turn where like it was really going to be the Muslim who was the bad guy." And honestly, honest to God, it never even occurred to us that we would, because yes, he was a Muslim, but essentially he was a cop, and we did some, we interviewed this really amazing Muslim cop in Portland, actually. And so I kind of got, I talked to him about what are the issues for him and how, and how to layer it into his story. But essentially he was always going to be this pretty, straight-laced cop, who and the issue for him was actually going from missing persons to homicide, and realize, and in theory, that's a career step, that's a step up. But in reality, when you're in homicide, someone has to die, and that's the story. That's his story.
Yeah, it was always about, because going back a long way, it was a female cop, and it was always just about that going from, the sister or someone really close to the victim to someone where, to somewhere it's the most horrific thing, and then to someone where it's a career opportunity, just to sort of highlight those different perspectives. So that was always on our mind. But the fact that he was Muslim never really, that never I mean, it was never a big deal, was it? Was it something I guess we decided early on? I can't even remember.
Yeah, I guess I always like to try to throw in different kinds of characters from different backgrounds because, I think that's just a reflection of the world we're in, and then just try to write them as not, human beings.
Yeah. And someone's actually just popped a question into the chat, which is pertinent to this point. At this point, is this just the two of you working together as a collaboration, or were you working with any other writers at this point in the process, just out of interest?
We were working with other, I think we took the research doc and we did a room. I think that's what happened, right? And and then we just brought, for me personally, who had never done anything, and all of a sudden I'm working with these really amazing established writers, and I'd watch them. Like Lou Fox was there at one point, and I remember watching her and just thinking, just sort of marveling at the fact that how quickly, when you got all these brains in a room, how quickly it all moves, and how
she's like a ninja warrior. She's like the ninja warrior of writers' rooms.
Yeah, it's nuts. And you can she comes up with something, and then you can track it. You can see all the thought events in her head that went, that took place in a second. So yeah, that was incredible for me, because that was my first, experience of that, and I was sort of blown away by an idea that if because I write books as well, if I sit on my own and try to figure out a scene in a book, a plotting could take me a week, and then in a room you get where I would get in a week in an hour. It's really it's pretty incredible. Yeah, so we had lots of, early on we were collaborating with a lot of really.
Well, when we were at one stage, we were setting the show in the UK, and we did a 3-week room with Heyday in the same room that had Harry Potter's wand, by the way.
Yeah. I had to play it very cool, didn't I? Getting my phone out and taking little pictures, act cool. But yeah, that was really amazing. Yeah, over in London.
Because David Hayman was one of the executive producers of the show. So
yeah, and then we had Pete McTighe there, and another amazing writer, and yeah, brilliant. I think from beginning to end, it's been just a collection of amazingly talented people from the very beginning to the end, and that's why I think that's why it's got a positive response, just because we had some really incredible people working on it.
And interestingly, you're talking about David Hayman even at that stage of the process. So when you're building the team and you're thinking about David, who ultimately came in to produce, how early do you start that process, Tony, from your work on it as showrunning a project?
Well, what happened was I happened to be in the UK pitching the show, and the new version of the show, because I'm part of NBC Universal International Studios, and they've got a London base, and so I was going to London every year when in the days that we could travel, and I just did a general meeting with David's offsider, Rosie Allison, who's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and David was coincidentally looking for a show that talked about how the internet had shaped and affected, us as a society, and that was something that Christian and I were really interested in. So he just asked to look at the pitch that we had, and he fell in love with it and he jumped on board when we were, before a script was written, basically, and we were, the original plan, and, having David Hayman, help you sort of shape and pitch a show is definitely an asset.
So out of interest at that point, what were you pitching with? What was your material?
This is a pitch doc. What didn't we?
A Bible.
A Bible, yeah.
But then we had when we sold it, when we first started selling the show, we had a pilot script as well. That was something that we just kind of kicked between us. Yeah,
and then we after the 3-week room in London, we updated the pilot, or maybe that's when we wrote the pilot, and then 2 other episodes written by other writers as well. So we had 1 through 3 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really, we just saw, as it turns out, we didn't set it in the UK. We set it in the USA through this kind of, torturous set of circumstances. We ended up, just selling it on, because I went and pitched it in LA, and we sold it on the pilot and the verbal pitch, which, I didn't actually even understand that at the time. It was basically, that's the way it was kind of working over there back then. I think it's sort of changed again since then, but back then that was the way it was working.
It's crazy. I would just get emails from Tony with just reams of good news, and because of the time difference, I would just wake up in the morning and this is fantastic, or I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and check my email, and incredible. Because it did. There's a few peaks, it did seem like it was going to happen, and then it fell over for a little while, and so when it finally got up with Netflix, it was a shock, really, a very pleasant shock.
It was an extraordinary week because we thought it was dead, because for various reasons it didn't happen in the UK, and then we decided, I'll give it a shot in America and reset it in America, and I went over for a week to pitch it, and there was a bidding war for it. It was crazy. Right.
So what's interesting is something that didn't fly in the UK comes over and flies in the UK. Everyone's always saying that there's always much to learn from the process, and you get these responses to your material. And what did you learn from the UK process, maybe, that informed how you developed the project on? Was there anything from the process of kind of losing the UK opportunities?
No, not really.
I was thinking, I hope Tony has a good answer for this, because I don't.
No, I learned nothing. You know what I learned, really? Time and place. That's the thing. It was exactly the same project that I pitched that everyone said no to in the UK in one after another, after it was already up in the UK and then fell over. And then I took exactly the same thing over. I was probably better at pitching it by the time I got to the US, because I kind of had a few practice pitches, and from the coming from the Australian system, which is pretty casual, the whole pitching process in America is much more formal, and it's much more you have to practice. I mean, surprise, you have to be professional. That was quite a shock to me, because I was like, you just say, in Australia, you have coffee with your friends, and you sort of say, what about this? And I think, oh yeah, maybe write something. It's much more informal. Whereas, I had to do practice pitches, and I had to kind of we had stopwatch, and I had to, it was serious. And then, and fortunately, the very first pitch, which I completely stuffed up, was the buyer who was not going to buy it, clearly not going to buy it. So they passed, and that was fine. And then after that, the second pitch, we got an offer in the room, which kind of, I'd read about. I think I read about it on Deadline once, or Variety, that that's what happens. Never had anything like that happen. And then, after that, every time I did it, the pitch got better, and people kept offering to buy it.
In the process, in between that amazing leap from Nowheresville to competitive pitches, you reversioned it, because obviously you were pitching it as an American series at this point. Am I right?
Yeah, I think we did a search and replace on the spelling. So, we took out the realized we took out the S's and put in the Z. There wasn't a whole, we didn't change a whole lot.
We didn't really change that much, because it was, because episode 1 was kind of the way the idea played out, it was kind of obvious, this is what someone would do in this situation if they found this crazy fucked up video of their brother this is what they would do, and so we just did what they would do.
Yeah, and there were small things like originally, in Clickbait, it's a volleyball team that Nick worked for.
Right, yes.
In the original, it was a soccer in UK. So we did things like that, but it wasn't.
We could have been even bigger. We could have been Ted Lasso. We could have been the thriller version of Ted Lasso.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we randomly chose women's volleyball after we went through. It took us a long time to work out the sport, and that was probably the biggest creative change. Yeah, and then because sports work differently in the UK and the US, and it's how big are they? It's a college volleyball team, but really the essence of the idea didn't change. Yeah. And I think that's what we got going to the UK, especially with the first episode. We really just we found our story, I suppose, and then we had it, at least the first episode.
Yeah. And once the decision was made that you were going to go with Netflix, creatively, I think it's really useful to understand that there's a journey to go on, and obviously they are involved and have suggestions and things like that. Yeah. And so that's an interesting process to then take that on board through the scripts that you were developing.
They made it very clear early on what kind of show they wanted. And so, we were given a brief, and, it was, they wanted something propulsive. It was kind of like when I first hear the word propulsive, yes. In LA, there are just always these buzzwords that kind of, and there's a new one every 2 years or so, or or they have a shelf life, these buzzwords. But propulsive is the word du jour, and it went from being sticky to propulsive, I think.
Sticky, that's right.
Sticky was big at one point, and then it became propulsive. And so they just wanted something that would work really well on their service. They wanted something that was kind of fast, and there was a bit of push and pull around that, because we wanted something that was a bit more characterful, and so that there was negotiation around that.
Yeah, I think really it was Netflix is such, you watch their shows, and it's such a the model of dropping all the episodes at once. It's such a bingey, but they have a lot of propulsive shows on there, and that there was that sort of that sort of encouragement to make it as bingey as possible, I suppose, and
You also look at the way that they take their metrics, they kind of record the first 28 days, and that's a key metric for them. So shows that play out quickly tend to be the ones that do better. Anyway, it was it's kind of like, it was interesting because I'd never made a whodunit before, and certainly not a propulsive whodunit. So
And other than the buzzword du jour of propulsive, what were the interesting things that you were finding partnering with a US streamer that were the sort of important decisions, or the important things about the project and the way it developed and shaped? What were their key kind of considerations from you guys?
I think there was a lot. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
No, after you.
Oh no, I think that there was a lot of emphasis on being careful or being respectful of race and background and all of that sort of stuff. There was a lot of effort just to make it, make sure that we weren't misrepresenting and things like that, which I thought was positive.
I think it's just kind of interesting understanding and getting the cultural differences. But Australia and America, we speak the same language superficially, but in other ways we don't speak the same language, and we have different meanings for our words, and so sometimes it takes a while to kind of work out what they mean, and I think that you know, with every commissioner, there is a toing and froing about working out, you know, testing the boundaries of, you know, where you take, you know, how far you take their notes and where you push back, and, you know, like, and that is in itself, you know, a learning process each time you do it. Like, it's different every time because of the nature of the each particular relationship.
Yeah, I think it was always important for them that it feels like an American show, and
yes.
You know, we had some American writers come over, yes, which was really helpful. So it was sort of, and as Tony said, it is a different language in lots of ways. You know, there's little subtleties and a lot of little things that that you don't pick up on, and having them there was really helpful, because it was important just not to not to feel like this American show, but it was actually secretly being shot in Australia, which it was, you know. So yeah.
And so in terms of, just to understand the work going on here, Tony, from the time that you managed to clinch a deal in LA, or clinch enough of a deal in LA to getting the scripts that could be made, how long did that process take? What was the sort of ongoing writing process?
6 months.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, basically we had an American style writer's room, which is something like 24, 26 weeks.
How many in the room, out of interest?
There was Christian, me, Melissa Scrivener-Love, Bradford Winters, script editor Joel Anderson, and a note taker. So, and then, you know, we had Lou Fox in the room. As at one point she was going to write a script, and then she ended up not writing one. And
then we had consultants,
and then we had sort of character consultants. So we'd have
which was a really great idea.
Yeah, and they wouldn't stay for the whole duration. They would just kind of like, they would just turn up for a day. Like, we got a woman who had been catfished by a guy. To help us sort of understand the psychology of episode 4. So we, at various points, we had, you know, like, we had 2 different journalists come in to help us with the details of plotting, and we had, you know, a Muslim friend of mine come in who I've worked with a lot, who was more a filmmaker, and, you know, just to try to get some of the cultural stuff right. So, you know, we had a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, working with Tony, you learn, you know, one of the big things I've learned working from Tony is that just the best stuff comes from real life. You know, little details that you can learn from real life that actually happened. It's always going to be better than whatever we can come up with. So that was, having all those people in the room was so valuable, and we would just sort of throw a load of questions at them.
Yeah, we got some really great detail. I mean, I think because my background is documentary as well as drama, so I've always been fascinated by, you know, the minutiae of the real. You know, like, I think that is where you find things that are both kind of fresh and also truthful.
I'm just sorry in advance. I think my dog's about to start crying. I may have to get up and let her out, but just ignore me if I do.
Or do a pass through the back of shot there.
Yeah.
Out of interest, because you mentioned earlier, Tony, that you've drawn on real life stories, and obviously, Christian, you did all your research earlier. Did you have to go through any process to actually be able to use those stories, or to secure some of that, or was that fine that you could just take that as source material as you wanted?
We always had contracts with everyone we brought in and talked to, and, you know, we paid people, and, you know, we made sure that they were happy with the contracts and that they understood what the relationship was. I mean, we didn't really want to exploit anyone, but the woman we had talked to had just written her own book, and she was quite happy to sort of share her experiences, because she just had written about them in the book. You know, I think in those situations you do have to be respectful, because, you know, you can't just, you know, take someone's story if they don't, you know, unless they consent to it, you know.
Yeah, I was thinking more about the crimes that you'd read about early on, that you said sort of inspired and you'd based some things on. They
were all on the public record, so
yeah. And they were pretty we drew inspiration from them, but none of them were really exactly what happened. You know, we would kind of twist and turn them, and they were often just a bit of a starting point.
We couldn't.
But it's funny, like I think a lot of people are kind of happy to tell the story. I remember in researching, I would call a lot of people and email people, and never did anyone say no or shut me out. Everyone I approached was more than happy to kind of talk about it and share, and so I think that helps as well. Oh, sorry, Tony, I cut you off there.
I was going to say that the suicide whispering story was actually really kind of, you know, it kind of stuck in my head. It was because it was so fucked up and dark, but we didn't end up going there or using it, you know. So we just touched upon it, upon the idea of it more faintly, but yeah, no, I mean, just the real story. And the other thing was, when we were in pre-production, this real story came out that was so close to the actual plot of Clickbait. It was right. Remember that? Like, yeah. And it was like, oh my God, people are going to think we stole this story because it was so and it was so bizarre. You just have to Google Lincoln Lewis catfish to read the real story. It's absolutely insane story.
What are the odds? What is going on?
I know, because, you know, like, it's such an unlikely storyline, you know, like, it is really kind of, you know, like, right on the verge of credibility. But I think that's also something to be said about when you take things from the truth, even though they seem unlikely, there is something in them that resonates.
Yeah.
And then the project goes into production, which is fantastic, and COVID hits.
Yep.
We all need a bit of inspiration at the moment to know that we can keep, you know, that things will pass and we can pick all our projects up again. But clearly you had some considerations trying to do that, and I'm interested in what some of the issues were.
Okay, so we knew that something, you know, like, we had to do something because all the American actors were hearing from their friends about how their shows were shutting down. This was about March last year, and they were all getting more and more freaked out, and they're sort of saying, well, how come we're still filming? They're shutting down all these shows in America. And, like, no one really knew what, you know, even how it was transmitted. Like, there was a lot of ignorance around it. And so our production plan was to shoot out the set, you know, because we're in a studio, and then, you know, and then close down. And we shot one day, and by the end of that day, we knew that we had to shut down. So we made a call, and we shut. We were the first Australian production to shut down. So that's a kind of weird badge of honor. And then, you know, like, but it was also, it was really, really hard for us because we had all of these actors from America, and, you know, like, and some of them had to go to the UK for other work, you know, like, it's kind of like a crazy, crazy time. And we shut down for 6 months. And, well, you know, 6 months technically, because we had to do a new pre-production process. And we lost a director, and we had a cast member grow 6 inches, and his voice dropped. And so there's a scene in episode 7 where he comes into the house, and he's 5'10". He goes upstairs, he's 5'4". He comes back downstairs, he's 5'10", and then he ends up back upstairs, and he's 5'4". And he had, you know, he had to speak in falsetto for the entire time.
Yeah, you'll notice, because we had episodes 1 through 6 done. So you'll notice when you're watching episode 7 and 8 is post-COVID, and there's a lot more exterior shots, a lot more. We wrote out all the crowd stuff, and it was completely crazy, wasn't it?
Well, the original final scene of episode 8 was going to be this incredible tracking shot where we see all the people who were going to be, you know, who we had met in the series, and it was going to be like this. Anyway, then it wasn't.
Yeah, then it was just a couple of actors in a closed church.
Yeah, you don't see people go inside; they're already inside. So like, and we had to get used to it. The new COVID protocols, but because we're NBCU, we had to follow the American COVID protocols, and they were much more. They're much tougher than the Australian ones. So, like everyone had to get tested. I think the actors had to get tested on a daily basis, and and everyone worked in pods, and like the whole thing. It was pretty tricky.
Mm.
Yeah, very tough times, but delivered and to air in a quite rapid fashion. And
I do think maybe COVID had something to do with its success as well. I think everyone was sort of primed for a bit of an escape. A lot of people were home. So I think even though it was, it did prolong production by about 1 million years, I think it was kind of, I think it owes something to the pandemic as well. Maybe. I'm trying to be very optimistic about it.
Certainly in Australia, like everyone when you watched it because you were kind of stuck.
Yeah, they had no excuse, did they? They had to.
Yeah. And binged very quickly, which is the streamer model, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So you've got, I guess you were getting responses very, very quickly through. Obviously, Christian, in your bubble of not being on social media, not so much, but Tony, you would have seen responses come through really quickly.
Yeah, I rejoined Twitter for about 5 minutes just to see them because like I hate Twitter, but just to see the memes, and it was just hilarious. Like it was like. And I think the thing that was kind of like, I've never experienced it before. Like in the past, when a show is a hit, it's like successful in one country. And then, like a few months further on down the track, it might sell to another territory or a bigger territory. And, and then after 2 years, you'll kind of get a sense of whether it was successful or not. And with Clickbait, it was like, 2 days. In 3 days, we were the number one streaming show on Netflix. Like,
yeah, it was
that happened just straight away, and suddenly we're in this whole world of data that this is all relatively new.
Yeah, it's crazy. I would see we're number one in Italy or something, and I'd be thinking, and I couldn't comprehend. It's too big globally. It's way too big to comprehend. It's crazy.
Or number one in Ecuador, and it was kind of like and also because some of the statistics looked, like we're from these data collecting websites. You didn't even know whether they were real or not, or whether you're just being kind of somehow it was all a phony thing. At one point, I did think maybe this is just an elaborate scam. It's just me. But then, and also, like just watching it take off on Twitter, it was a really kind of extraordinary moment. Very, very exciting, although we were still all in lockdown. So the only way we could celebrate was kind of like, so we had a Zoom thing where we all got together and sort of drank sort of packaged cocktails.
Yeah.
No, I have promised to keep some time aside for some questions, and we've had some really interesting ones coming through, and a lot of them are directed specifically, so I'm going to keep to that. And one of the questions here is to you, Christian, that as an episodic drama writer and coming into and working alongside very, very established television writers and people and screenwriters, the question is, how did you negotiate the territory of sort of holding a sense of ownership but letting go enough that those writers could, be really coming into that process?
Yeah, I mean, coming in, I was very aware of my strengths, but also my weaknesses, which was really inexperience. And for me, and actually this sums up the writing process with Tony anyway, it's, for me, I'm never ever precious about really anything. If the best idea wins, it doesn't really matter to me who comes up with it, or it's all about the project and the best idea. So I never ever struggled with anything like that, any sort of letting go. And I guess part of that was probably because I knew it was in such good hands anyway. But no, I never struggled with that at all. It was kind of, I mean, it's great because I have people, you know, friends, people I've not seen for years reaching out and saying, oh, it's, you know, clickbait, blah, blah, I love clickbait. And it's a thrill because obviously I know I brought a lot to it, but really it's just that all these amazing people worked on it and it just makes the show better and makes you look better. Really, I've it's never have an issue with, never have an issue with killing my darlings, anything like that. And that's sort of what the process of working with Tony is. Anyway, it's very egoless, if an idea is good, then we follow the idea. And if it's shit, we get rid of it. And it doesn't really matter who came up with that, you know. I mean, I'm not. Maybe Tony's keeping score, but I'm definitely not keeping score.
I'll give you the tab later.
Yeah. He's got a blackboard.
No. I mean, I think that's why Christian and I work so well together, because we're both of the same view that, you know, like you just do your work and you just keep, you know, we would just pass drafts backwards and forwards to each other, you know, like, and we would just, and, you know, we had to do it really fast as well, because there was a certain stage where we were in production and we had to, you know, there were certain scripts that weren't quite working, you know, in their original form. So we had to reinvent them fairly quickly. And, so, you know, like it was a pretty, you know, that was the really enjoyable part of the process, really. And
was that stressful time was sort of quite fun. At the moment I was stressed, but now I remember and think, God, it was actually kind of fun. And I just had the job of, you know, just writing. Tony was writing and show running. So he was, I mean, for him, it was much more stressful, really. He had the big job.
Yeah, but we kind of did it all together. And you know, like, I mean, my view on all of this is that, you know, like this is, the more you can emphasize the collaborative nature of this medium, then the better off you are. I think there are all kinds of mythologies around authorship and ownership and authorship and, you know, like, and I'm not of, you know, that's just not hugely important to me. Like, I think, you know, having a sense of what is right and wrong, I think, you know, like, you know, having taste, but that's just being a creative, you know, like it's just, you know, that is just basically what you do. But to not then associate entitlement or ego with it, I think it's actually really useful to sort of think in those terms, because you can just get more done. You can get it done faster. I mean that you can, and also, you know, I think if you do it respectfully, you know, everyone wins.
Yeah, my one, there's no way to say this without sounding wanky or pretentious, but my one sort of writing philosophy is just write stuff that I would want to watch. And as long as that one thing is being ticked off, then it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's the rest is just fun, really.
Yeah. And Christian, you mentioned Tony's role of show running. Show running isn't something we've really had a lot in New Zealand yet in terms of how we distinguish the different roles on projects. It's, you know, we're quite delineated to producer, director, writer, sometimes director, writer. For you, show running, what's the right way of putting this? But obviously the value, and for you, how does that role encapsulate what you want to achieve on screen and why you sit in that role? And what's the benefits of it?
I'm sorry, was that to me? It just cut out for about...
No, I'm sorry about that. No, that was a question.
No, it was my...
It's
to me, sorry. I thought it was to Christian.
No, sorry. No, I lost 30 seconds anyway, so I'll be interested to hear Tony's answer, because I don't know what the question was.
Yeah, there are a number of different models of show running. There's the American model, which is kind of how we made Clickbait, just because, you know, that was Netflix's expectation. And the American model is much more hierarchical. Like the showrunner is the boss, and you know, like and I kind of like that. I did like that. But you are, like you basically need to sign off on every creative decision that's made, and and the directors also understand that relationship. So the director is quite happy to hand over to you. So, like I got the scripts there. I got we got the scripts early. We got and I got the cuts really early, and I took over the cuts, and I, directed all the ADR and did all the visual effects and blah, 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 mixes and blah, blah, blah. So you take, so in that version of show running, you are like the director on a feature film. That's your role, that's your function, to sort of see through the vision of the ultimate show. In Australia, we have various versions of that. Like we don't have the same amount of money, because that's also quite an expensive way of doing things. Our versions of it are different, and it's also controversial because not every producer in Australia believes in the show running model, and they stick to the more traditional version. I mean, my company, Tap, and my previous company, Matchbox, we built our brand and our production model based around this show running idea, which is to always elevate the head writer if they choose, and also you also have to remember that not every writer is a showrunner. Like, because show running actually involves talking to people. Not every writer likes to talk to people. So, but it's a necessary part of show running. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to, make those kinds of judgment calls, and you have to kind of enjoy it. Otherwise, really just don't do it because it's so stressful. But in our model of it, we always try to, have a writer who then becomes an executive producer on the show or a producer on the show, and their job is to see through the vision from the scripts to the final end product, and that involves a surprising amount of work. I just worked with Belinda Chaco on a show called Fires, which is on the ABC at the moment, about last year's or the 2019 mega fires, and Belinda just worked 7 days a week, 12, 14 hours a day for a year, just constantly, and just watching her just work, and in a way work that is quite invisible as well, because she can take credits for scripts that she but she just massaged and worked with the directors and worked with the all the key creatives, worked around the casting, and she just kind of gave her creative all to that show. And I think the show is better as a result of that.
That show is great, by the way. I don't know if we've talked about it, Tony, but that show it's so good. It's so my parents are obsessed with it as well, so, which is a good sign.
Yeah, it's very different from Clickbait. It's kind of like characters and dealing with human emotions and
And so with Clickbait, you both managed to produce a propulsive serialized drama. Other than our new word du jour, is there anything for each of you that you've taken from Clickbait that you're going to keep and use in your ongoing work that was part of the sort of learning process, which each project always is? Christian, is there something that you've taken from the process of making Clickbait that stays?
Yeah, I mean, I learned an incredible amount from during the entire process, but yeah, definitely with when it was getting shot and all of that sort of stuff, I learned so much. And I guess if I try to think of one thing to boil it down, is one of the things I was learned that it's sort of that just to be, the way Tony writes is really it's just so economic. Every single line, whether it's a dialogue or in the big print, every single word has to sort of earn its place, and that for me is something I've already brought into everything else. My third book is about 20,000 words less than my others because I'm being much more brutal, and I think that makes for a better read or a better watch. So that's definitely a huge thing I've learned as a writer. But there's a dozen more things, but that's one.
Tony, what's your takeaway from Clickbait, if you have one?
Well, I loved working with Christian and Joel on the scripts. That was probably my favorite part of it, because we were under the pump, but it was just such a kind of great process. So the idea of just like having a squad is pretty is pretty good, and so to do that and to be able to show as a part of the show running process, I think is pretty good. Like it's really enjoyable, and it also, I think it can make for good work. So I would sort of say that, and like every time you do a project, you learn who to work with, and how to continue working with them if it worked out. So that those things are really important.
Yeah, we had a little office, didn't we, at Docklands, and I have such fond memories. It was sort of away from the main office, and it was just this nice little cozy spot that we would me, Joel and Tony would just sort of hang out. Really, it was great.
Yeah.
Back in the time you could travel, but there you go.
Yep.
We have to wrap up the session now. It's been so enjoyable hanging out with you both. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for making it so easy.
Yes. Yeah, that was a blast. I can't believe it's 4:30. Oh, well, I can't believe it's been an hour. 4:30 here, whatever it is there.
Nice. Yeah. So thank you very much, and we're very grateful, of course, to Script to Screen, who have made this webinar possible. And thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thank you for all the questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them, but enjoy the continued success of Clickbait, both of you. And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. See you soon.
Take care.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
See you later.